Hi class, this is Marshall Sponder, your lecturer for Web Analytics and Web Intelligence, MKT 9738 and 4123. I'm going to go over the first couple slides really quickly because if you were going over the last presentation, they're the same ones. We clearly are getting this data. And here's examples to the right of what that data is. Web analytics traffic is first-party traffic, site registrations, transaction records. I really basically give you examples of this different type of data that digital marketers need and want now. So anybody studying this course that seriously wants to get involved in data analytics in some form, it's going to need various aspects of this data. And then obviously we've got this marketing automation is the big thing that everybody wants to do, and it makes sense because there's so much data. I mean, wouldn't anybody really want to automate stuff? I mean, you got a lot of stuff to do. I mean, as a teacher, as an instructor, I have many students. So anything I can do to make my courses more streamlined would make sense to me. For example, like how can I make it so that my test auto grade, or how can I make it that I have everything set up with lectures that are taped ahead of time so that students can go through that. Not that I don't want to be available or be present, but I have to think about the fact that the bigger my sphere, the more I need to make the tools that I'm doing work for me. So, and I think marketers realize that if they are going to create customized content, that they need to get out to people and also advertise to them and and get that to work at scale. They need to automate it, but they can't just automate it. They have to make it at least semi-intelligent so it can make some decisions based on who the customer is. So business rules need to be baked into it. And then we need to understand and score the customer. So you need to have skills of all of that. And I think there's a couple of case studies in the course that really do address all of these things, including, especially I should say, the one we're going to study in a couple lectures from now on the Informatica case study. Just to say, this again is from the last presentation. We need these kinds of things. These are the kinds of things that you need to consider being good at if you're going to really want to scale your analytics and your marketing today. You need that multi-channel campaign management. You need the marketing automation, customer scoring, and mobile optimization and mobile ad optimization. You need to have that. Your company needs to have that. Almost every company needs to start thinking about getting good at all these things. And because, like I said in the last presentation, the customer journey is fragmented, and now you have a lot of different people at a lot of different places, and you can't really do this manually anymore. It gets too complicated. You can't even keep track of all of it. You have to build automation that's going to handle a lot of it. Why? So that you can be present when you need to be. That's what you build the automation for. It's not to relieve being present. It's to be strategic about when and where you're present. And you don't get stuck spending your energy on a lot of things that aren't really ultimately that important, that you don't really need to be there for, so that you can be present for the things you really need to be present for personally. And, that's what I think this is all about. That's what I think all these tools are really for. It isn't to get away from dealing with customers. It's to be strategic about how you deal with customers. And when this is an analytics report we'll look at in Google Analytics, but it's just a screenshot of a recreation of one of them from my book, so that we didn't violate any copyrights, without saying that we can track all these things. As long as you instrument it well, you can get all this data. Again, we went through all of this. Now, to get to the next level, what does it take to really set all of this up? Avinash Koshak is a friend of mine. He is well known at Google and in the web analytics space as an analytics evangelist. He's probably something similar to Deepak Chopra for web analytics. He always makes you feel good when you listen to him, and he always tries to put a positive slant on, yes, web analytics is easy, but it's also hard. It's actually hard to do this stuff well, and honestly, web analytics and what Avinash deals with doesn't really go into big data as much as it goes into structured data for business reports. And that's what mostly analytics is, web analytics is anyway. It isn't really exactly business analytics though. So the first level here is, and he has a chart, but I broke down this chart. It's an element of web analytics. The very first thing that someone has to do is figure out the right tool. Like, is it Adobe? Is it Google Analytics? Is it Web Trends? That's the obvious one, but it's actually a lot more complicated than that. There's like zillions of tools out there, not just analytics tools, but all the kinds of tools. And then you have to choose the metrics to track, and I added, it's just some introspection and trial and error that needs to be there. But they're basically simply numbers or percentages. And that corresponds. Notice that this is 1 and 2. This seems to go back with 1 and 2 of the maturity model. If we look at this, there's a maturity model somewhere, or there was a maturity model in the last one, not in this one. So there's 1 and 2. And then you have to define the business goals. But this first 2 levels here of the 1 and 2 seem to correspond to like just getting started, picking the right tool, and then getting the metrics. You could get stuck on this for a while, just on these 2 steps, and then figuring out what you want to achieve. Again, where are you spending your money? Where are you spending your time? What do you need to do more of? What do you care about? What drives that? Now, once you get that down to something that can be measured by one of these tools, so again, you need to figure out, what do I need to do? Then you figure out what kind of tool would measure that. Okay. Then you have to develop the custom key performance indicators. And I think it's better if it's custom, rather than just some kind of generic thing that's an intermediate metric that comes out of the box. I think for most companies, they're going to end up having to customize it, and it's going to work best in their company because it's going to be involved in the business process of what they do, to make money, to succeed, to stay in business. And then you've got to actually design the analytics tools to collect the data. So that would be the subdimensions, the dimensions that you collect your web analytics data, such as traffic sources, keywords, referring sites, but even more so like zip codes or anything you need to set up specific in the analytics platforms. At this point, the companies might get really involved just in getting all that to work, and you might get some people that enjoy just generating reports. At least that's what it used to be maybe 10 years ago when Avinash was kind of thinking this way. Now in the last 5 or 6 years for the cloud, we have the big brains, the analysts, big data. So now you need to write algorithms, and you need to figure out, who to report it to, which means you need custom reporting, which is over here. And now you have higher level people that have bigger data skills that you spend a lot more money on, that they're custom data pukes, and that they have, now you have more advanced segmentation and analytics that you can do with a converged marketing stack. If you develop insights out of that, then you look at your competitors and see what you're doing, and then you have the business impacts and new opportunities. So he thinks this can take a couple years to get through. I don't know. I mean, this was his way of looking at it, but I thought it was useful, and I put it in the book as well. But notice that the way he thinks of it, these first 2 or 3 steps could take a couple years, just, these first 2 steps here, and then figuring out how to make that work. The data capturing is pulling tools in place and identifying the first set of metrics. He thinks this can take a couple years. Be honest with you, I think it varies. I don't think there's any rule. I mean, a small, tiny company, yeah, 1 to 3 years might be true. I mean, because you might get something out of the box in a month or two. But I think to actually get it to work and, to really make a lot of money and business productivity out of it, I think it's going to take a lot of experimenting and time. And in that pathway, when we actually set up the analytics, we need to think about, when we actually instrument the analytics, that what is it that we're measuring when we need to set them up. And one of the things is, where is someone going to go on the website, like a specific page, like a thank you page, or a purchase page, or an information page. So we need to have a destination. Another thing we can measure is how long they spent, like duration, or how many pages how many different pages that they look at when they were on a website. And then finally, we could also look like, did they do a particular event, something that happened? Did they click on something? So we can define that in analytics. Those are the things that the analytics tools can do. So you need to get to the point where you can define success as in terms of these things, because if we're going to work with web analytics, we need to translate our business success into this kind of metric that we can measure. So it means we have to translate. That's one thing we have to do. Another thing we have to do is we have to, in a more broader sense, if we're going to work with bigger projects, we have to, again, define what we want to achieve, and we need to kind of set some realistic expectations of how long it's going to take, and then bring in the right talent or the right tools and develop them and move them into production. And I think web analytics usually tends to be, a small part of the overall data acquisition and data marketing stack of a company. So, where in some companies they may have thought that was it, I think in reality, in most companies now, the reason why it's better to be broader than just web analytics is because, for the most part, most of what you're doing is a lot bigger than web analytics, and it's about the customer experience. And if you were just focusing on one or two tool, it might not be enough. I mean, you might get a job out of it for a year or two, but it would probably end up being a dead end. That's my feeling, because I think that's where it is today. It's in using a variety of tools and in a variety of situations, not just one. And but one of the things that I think analytics is really good at is figuring out whether something fulfills the purpose for which it was created for. And if you can define goals that need to happen on a website, you can then instrument them and see if they're happening or not. So that would be, first of all, you need to understand, why did I create this website? Why did I create this experience? Or why will I create it? And then you could set the analytics to measure that. You could also measure whether the website, in fact, is doing those things, or does it seem to be fulfilling those things or not? And then, are these the things you want customers to do, and do you understand what they came there to do? Because there might be a difference. And the user interface, the user experience on the website may be a factor that limits them being able to achieve their goals. So that might be something. So analytics could be very good for those things. And of course, to create a measurement that's going to be useful, you probably want to think about a metric that can be acted on. And that's really important, because, so the perfect metric would be one, the key performance indicator is one that everyone who needs to work with it can understand what it is. It's not too hard to calculate, and that it's not too hard to get a hold of the data to do it, and that it can be used in a variety of situations in the area it's being used, and perhaps beyond it. So when you think about that, each one of these doesn't seem like it's too hard to do, given the time. But when you get them all together to get something that does all four of those things, that might you might have to go for a couple cycles to get to something that does all of these things. You want to get something that's in the middle of that has all of those things. Another thing we can explore in web analytics, and you'll see in your assignments, is that you can create segments. And one of the most powerful tools in web analytics is creating segments. So segmentation, for example, you can look at the behavior of people based on what they do on the website, because we can measure those things, and figure out who are the highest value customers, because you can score them. And then you can also track where they go and what pages they care about and how long they spend on them. So you do all kinds of things like that. Once you can define it, you can use the tools. Now, bear in mind, web analytics tools are only good for the websites that they're being monitoring. So everything is just built on monitoring what's going on the website. So if a lot of your marketing value is happening on different websites, you're going to need other sources of data and figure out how to combine all that together. But basically, if you want to know what the web analytics tools are good for, you would say what parts of the website, what pages, what sections are working for the purposes that you would created them for, and which don't get any traffic or get traffic. Where do people leave the website? Which pages? Which ones have exceptionally high rates of them leaving? And which things are driving traffic that are having more success, and which products are selling nuts? Those kinds of things. Again, when you can define your success in terms of things that these tools can answer, you have a better shot. And that is your end of this presentation 6. Cheers.